to the cloud. A recording in progress, so the session will be recorded. Right, some expectations. I expect you to be a bit familiar with Ansible. This is not really an introduction session to Ansible. I expect you to be, in the best case, also a bit familiar with Kubernetes. When I say a bit, I'm not expecting you to be gurus. I'm trying to be complete in my explanations. But this is not the kind of class where I'm going to teach you how it works from the beginning. So what I have done, I have created 2 virtual machines. Of course, you can follow along if you want to, but probably the best thing to do is to pay attention and try to understand and make sure that you are all right with all the contents that we are covering here. I know myself, and I know that normally I talk a lot and I talk quite fast, and especially if this kind of material is new to you, you might have trouble keeping up with the pace, and if you want to do multitasking, it might be difficult. So what did I do? I created 2 virtual machines. Here is a virtual machine that is running a Rocky. This Rocky machine is, oh, wrong screen. This Rocky machine is using the following. So OS release is showing Rocky 8.4. 3-M is showing 2 gigabytes of RAM in total. The amount of RAM is not really very important. Disk space is not really very important. But I'm starting from the Rocky machine. In my part of the presentation, I am going to show you how to manage Ubuntu and Kubernetes, and Kubernetes is on Ubuntu. I will give you some more insight in the how and what of the Kubernetes platform, but I'm going to show you today how to automatically create an all-in-one cluster, Kubernetes cluster, and then I will show you how we can run a container on that all-in-one cluster. And then this is only a 2-hour session, so with that the day will be over. Good. If you look at the requirements for working with Ansible first, let me put it in a document. So the requirements are as follows. First, you need a user account. This user account needs to exist on the control node as well as on the managed nodes. I have one managed node. The managed node is the Ubuntu node. And on my Ubuntu node, I have a user with the name student. On the control node, I have a user with the name root. I choose to give you a basic setup where really nothing has been taken care of yet, because I geeked out this morning and I wrote a playbook to make sure that all the setup is happening automatically for you. Next thing that needs to happen, pre-requirement. That's really a pre-requirement. OpenSSH up and running. Ansible is using SSH to manage the managed devices, and I am managing Ubuntu desktop. I'm going to build my my cluster on Ubuntu desktop, and you do need OpenSSH to be up and running. So that's something that I have done manually. You can imagine if Ansible needs OpenSSH, then you cannot use Ansible to set up OpenSSH because it is needed. The next thing that we need a dedicated user account. Now there are, of course, options to work with different user accounts throughout all the servers that you are managing. That's too complicated for the time that we have today, so that's not something that we are going to do. So I am going to create a dedicated user account with the name Ansible. The name is completely up to you. I wanted to create this user Ansible. The next thing that we need a password for the dedicated user account. We need SSH keys to be present. I have pre-configured the SSH keys. Did I do that? No, I need to do that manually. It's the only thing that I'm not going to do through the playbook. And with that, we are more or less ready, I guess. Everything else involves tasks like an Ansible.cfg. You need an inventory. Everything else is going to be done by the playbook that I have set up for you. So that is what I did. I started with version setup, and I geeked out this morning, and I wrote a playbook. I have a second screen in front of me with some notes in case I get lost. In case you are wondering how thorough did you test the playbook, well, I did not, and that is because I like living on the edge, and I like testing while we go, because I am pretty convinced that having a session where things don't work smoothly at every single time might be a useful learning experience. So if it's going wrong, we will see, and we will see how to work it out. So this is roughly what we need to do, and I am going to use Git. So sudo dnf install Git. I need Git because I created a Git repository, and I would like to invite you to create that Git repository as well. I reverted my snapshot. Yeah, I reverted my snapshot, and that Git repository is in git clone https://github.com/sandervanvugt/Ansible in 3 weeks. In case you are wondering why is it Ansible in 3 weeks, well, that is because as my normal work, I teach courses on learning.o'reilly.com, and in that platform I have a course with the name Ansible in 3 weeks, and what we are doing here is basically a subset of Ansible in 3 weeks. If you want to know more about that platform, including free 30-day registration for learning.o'reilly.com, feel free to reach out directly to me by email after this session. Please notice that I suck in multitasking, so any direct questions are going to be unanswered. I need to focus on my content here. With any follow-up questions, just drop me an email and I'll be happy to help. So in Ansible in 3 weeks, I have this playbook with the name setup.yaml, and that is what I'm going to use. Let me create a dedicated directory. I like working with project directories because there's so many things going on, and let me move the setup.yaml to this dedicated directory. Then there is one thing that I forgot in my pre-requirements. Yeah, I did have the impression I'm forgetting something. What I forgot in my pre-requirements, I need to install the Ansible software as well. Of course, you can automate that as well by using a bash shell script, but if you're working with Ansible, you shouldn't be doing bash too much. So I do need to do a sudo dnf install -y epel release. That's the easiest way to provide the Ansible software to you. And then I need to do a sudo dnf install Ansible to install the Ansible software. And there we should be up and running in not too much time. By the way, you will see me typing lots of commands. Normally, I also provide my course history at the end of this class. I like Pastebin. I can copy all my commands to the Pastebin, and I can share that link to you so that you have my course history, which allows you to be fully focused on what we are doing through the session, and have the documentation, including all the errors that I've typed after this session. Right, enjoying some coffee while it's still hot. Okay, so we can go into this setup directory, and I am going to show you setup.yaml. Before I'm opening the setup.yaml, I am pretty sure that some of you already know Ansible. If you are up to date with what is happening in the Ansible universe, there is this new thing called collections. Collections are default in Ansible 2.10 and later, and they change the name of the modules that you are going to use in your playbooks. As we are on Rocky, and Rocky is basically following what is happening on Red Hat Enterprise Linux, I am going for old style, and I'm using the collection-less module names. The thing is, if I would use collections and you are trying to run it on 2.9, then you would get in lots of troubles. If you are using 2.10 version of Ansible and you do have collections, it's a pretty easy fix to make it collection aware. But this is what I've created, and in case you are wondering, hey, this debug, shouldn't that be ansible.internal.debug? Yes, that is true. If you are working in a collection compatible way, I don't do that. All right. So what am I doing here? Well, I am going to explain what I'm doing in this playbook. It's a nice warming up that allows us to revisit some core components in Ansible. Then we are going to run the playbook, and hopefully everything is going to be all right. And if it's not all right, then I can also always do some quick manual fixes to make sure that we have enough time to talk about the Kubernetes setup. So I created a multi-play playbook. The first play is executed on localhost. Hey everybody, I'm fully aware that what I'm showing you here, there are many ways of doing it. Let's just enjoy what is happening. If it is really wrong, I do appreciate your input. If it can be done better, yeah, I know there are things that can be done better, but I'm not trying to make it too overly complicated, because this is not an advanced Ansible class. I want everybody to be able to follow along, but I want to try to avoid getting into discussions like, hey Sander, why are you taking approach A? Because you can also do approach B. My answer up front is, yes, it is very interesting, but I don't care about approach B as long as approach A is running. The purpose here is not to get a perfectly running playbook, but a running playbook. So in this playbook, we are starting on the host localhost. Localhost is a control host, and the control host in terms of virtual machines is the Rocky machine. Now in the next line, let me show you line numbers to make discussing a little bit easier. In the next line, line 4 that is, we see getter facts. Getter facts is set to no. Ansible is doing that thing called fact gathering. Fact gathering is pretty awesome if you want to work with conditionals, and we are going to use it further on. But if you don't need to do fact gathering, then you better switch it off to save yourself some time. Then in Ansible, you are going to run tasks, and in order to run tasks, you might need specific privileges. And in order to make sure that you run your tasks with escalated privileges, I have this statement become yes. And in the become yes, well, that means that basically it's going to try to run all tasks using sudo privileges. Next, I have hard-coded some variables. Because this is a playbook that should be usable to set up anything that you want, any basic Ansible configuration, and you need to tell the playbook how this is going to work. Pascal, small correction: we are looking at Rocky at this moment. So we need to tell it how it is going to work. And in order to do that, I have defined a variable of the dictionary type. Variables can be set in two different ways. There is the loop, there is the dictionary. For this specific variable, I wanted to do a dictionary. So we have host names, and in host name we have Kubuntu. Kubuntu is a contraction between Kubernetes and Ubuntu, and we have dummy. And in case you are wondering what is dummy, that's just a dummy that I wanted to include because using iterations like loops is not so very interesting if you have one item only. I wanted to have multiple items. So we have a variable Kubuntu with key values, host name and FQDN and IP address, and that is what I want to use to automatically generate the required information on the control host. Control host needs to know how to reach out to everybody, and this is how we are doing it. Next, we go to the list of tasks. And in the list of tasks, I have a couple of Ansible modules. As you hopefully know, an Ansible module is basically a small Python script that will be executed to accomplish a specific task. The good thing about Ansible is that also if you know nothing about Python, you are still capable of running these Ansible modules, because Ansible is really a very usable layer on top of the Python layer. Now, when I'm developing, and really this is something that I've done in the hour before start of this class, so this is all very new. In the development phase, I like using the debug module, because the debug module is a module that you can use to run your variables, to verify your variables. And the variable that I wanted is item.value.ip address. And that was just a test that is going to check on the item IP address right here. Now, how are we doing that? We are doing that using with dict on hostname. So with dict is considering a variable of the dictionary type. And I'm using with dict to iterate over the variable. This is the variable hostname. And in this variable, we are going to address item. Item is the Kubuntu or the dummy that we see here. And then we have the value. The value is referring to the 3 key value pairs that we have right here. And if I say item.value.ip address, I'm going to work with the value of the IP address. And that is just a check. And in that check, I am printing the IP address just to make sure that everything is working all right and we are not in any trouble before continuing. Fun fact, you are seeing with dict, and you might be thinking, hey, shouldn't that be loop? Now, the funny thing is that the Ansible team themselves, the Ansible developers, sometimes change their opinion. When Ansible 2.5 was released, the statement was, everybody, you should start using loop, because we are going to discontinue the with underscore whatever pretty soon. They changed that opinion, and nowadays, since Ansible 2.8, the opinion coming from the developers themselves is that with underscore whatever can be pretty useful as well, and they are not going to be discontinued anytime soon. You may have heard, and I even taught that myself in my courses because I was missing this part of information, but you may have heard that you should use plugins and filters instead of with underscore whatever. But now the statement is feel free to continue using with underscore whatever. And that is why I'm using with dict. And with dict is iterating over the variable, and the variable is right here. You might be aware that addressing variables in Ansible can be challenging. The syntax of your variable depends according to the environment where you are addressing the variable. Here the statement is that the value starts with the name of the variable, and because it does, we need the variable between double curly braces and between double quotes as well. Then I'm going to set up my control host, because that was the purpose of this playbook. Of course, I can create these files manually, but hey, if you're using Ansible, try to go Ansible all the way. And that is exactly what I'm doing here, and that is why the next task starting on line 21 is line in file. Line in file is a convenient way that you can use to add lines to configuration files. The file that I want to manage here, and that is, as we can see on line 3 on localhost, is the file etc host. And in that file, I want to define item.value.ip address, followed by item.value.fqdn, followed by item.value.hostname. And again, we are using with dict. As you can see, we see with dict a couple of times in this playbook to make sure that we iterate through all of these variables. And the list of variables, as you understand, can be an endless list of variables. So the result of all this is that at the end, we have an etc hosts file. And etc hosts, that is the small scale solution to offer hostname to IP address resolution. So item.value.ip address is taking the IP address. I hope you see the relation between line 23 and really lines 9 up to 11 and lines 13 up to 15. That is what we are doing in line 23 to automatically generate the etc hosts file. Then on line 25, we are starting with the inventory. Let me bring it on top of the screen so that we can see the next couple of lines. The inventory in Ansible, as you probably know, is an inventory of all the hosts that you are going to manage. Inventory can be pretty smart. This is a very dumb inventory because dumb is good enough. I just need the inventory to contain the names of the hosts that I want to manage. So it is creating inventory. It's using line in file again, and in line in file it creates a file with the path inventory. That is a relative path name, by the way, and the relative path name will mean that it will create it in my current path, and the current path is my project directory, and that's exactly what I want. Then create yes is required because line in file by default assumes that the file exists, and if it does not exist, it will generate an error, and that is why I have create yes, so that the file will be created in case it did not yet exist. And the line that we are adding is item.value.hostname, which again is the hostname that comes from the variables that we have just seen. And last, I am creating a very minimal Ansible.cfg. You will notice, yeah, that's a choice basically. The choice here is to keep my Ansible.cfg minimal and to provide some of the parameters on the command line as well. Some people seem to think that everything needs to be in Ansible.cfg, but I want to show you that flexibility is allowed, and this flexibility allows you to provide connectivity parameters either in Ansible.cfg or in your play or on the command line. You can provide them on different levels, and that is something that I'm going to need here. So what am I doing in Ansible.cfg? I am using create yes to create the file, and I'm using the block in file module. The block in file module allows you to add multiple blocks. So here we have the block. The key block starts with the value. The value is a pipe. The pipe makes sure that we maintain the formatting. And the formatting is printing different lines. So we have defaults and we have host key checking is false. And that is going to be added to the Ansible.cfg file. And last, on line 38, well, last in this part of the playbook, there's a tag. The tag is an identifier for a part of the playbook. And I like using tags, especially if I'm developing new playbooks, where I'm playing around a little bit, where not everything is immediately working, because, you know, I'm human. I make lots of typos, lots of stupid mistakes that I need to look up in the documentation. And that means that at some point, the first part of the playbook is working, and I want to focus on the second part. And in order to allow me to do that, I have these tags. You can use Ansible playbook -- tags followed by the specific tags that you want to run, and that allows you to easily skip over some parts that you don't want to run. Right, then the second play. So the second play is setting up an Ansible user account on the remote host. Now that we are at line 40, we should have our bookkeeping up to date on the control hosts, meaning that we can reach out to the managed host, and we have basic functionality. We have a very basic Ansible.cfg, a very basic inventory file, and that is about it. So on line 40 we go on, and we are going to use set up a user account with the name Ansible. Let there be no misunderstanding about it. Yes, it is possible to have different names for your user accounts on your managed machines. It's possible, it's not really workable, so I would advise against it. So what I like to do, I like to create a username with a user with the name Ansible. This Ansible is just a hard-coded name. Use it whatever kind of name you want to give it. You want to use the name Santos, call the user Santos. That is okay. But I'm just choosing to create a user with the name Ansible. Hosts all refers to all hosts that are known in inventory. And then we have a getter facts yes. Getter facts means that fact gathering is going to happen. And fact gathering is this amazing part of Ansible where we are going to discover facts about the managed hosts. Like Ansible distribution, and Ansible distribution is in fact the only fact that I am using. Next, I'm creating a block. So we have name setup Ubuntu, and we have a block. And this block is applying to the statement when Ansible distribution is Ubuntu. So in fact gathering, we are going to discover which distribution we are using. And based on the discovered distribution, if the distribution is Ubuntu, this is the approach. And you can see that this is repeated. In line 53, we start another block that is setting up a Rocky, and that is going to work on when Ansible distribution is Rocky. And why is that? That is for the simple reason that there might be small differences in the distribution. What do we see? Well, in block, we see that the block is a collection of tasks. I don't know if you're familiar with blocks. If you're not, blocks are just awesome, because sometimes you have a series of tasks that you only want to apply if you are on a specific distribution. Now, the situation is that if I am on Ubuntu, and I need to look real carefully here, because this is a part where I might have missed something in my setup as well. So when I am on Ubuntu, I am going to create a user with the name Ansible. And I am going to make sure this user is present. And then I'm going to set a password for the user. Now I know that if you read the Ansible FAQ, you can also use a Python plugin to set a password. Plugins are awesome, but also they put the threshold higher. They make it more complicated. And that is why in this case I have selected to work with shell. Shell is a method in Ansible that allows you to run straight Linux commands. In Ansible, the golden rule is always that you want to do things the most Ansible way, which means that you want to use specific modules if specific modules are available. But sometimes it's just more convenient to run a Linux command. And that is what I'm doing right here. So I'm using shell. And the command is echo Ansible pipe password. That's a colon, not a pipe, change pass WD. Chpass WD allows you to change a password for existing users through a pipe. I recently discovered this option in Red Hat. The equivalent is pass WD -- standard in, and that's what we are doing in the next block. The thing here is that after we have reached line number 50, in line number 50 on Ubuntu, we should have a user with the name Ansible and the password set to password. And then a remote user. Remote user is also important because I have kind of a new Ubuntu setup, and I want to reach out to this new Ubuntu setup as a specific user account. And the specific user account in this case is student. That's a default user that I created, and of course it depends on the exact name of the user that you have created. You might want to build in some more flexibility by using variables, but that would be something for stage 2. When I'm developing playbooks, larger playbooks like this, I like to keep information directly in the playbook in the beginning. And once a playbook is nicely working, I'm trying to decouple site-specific information from the code so that you can easily run it in other environments as well. But for now, I have no hard time having a remote user student to reach out to Ubuntu. Now, if you understand what this Ubuntu thing is doing, line 52, by the way, is using the Ansible Vugt. Ansible Vugt discovery will always discover which distribution you are on. Excuse me. If you are on Red Hat, there is even an Ansible distribution family Vugt that can be convenient. And I want this block to be executed when Ansible distribution is Ubuntu. And with that, I don't think we need to talk very long about lines 54 until 61, where we see when Ansible distribution is Rocky, we do the same thing in a slightly different way. What is a slightly different way? Well, on Rocky, I have a root login, so I'm using a remote user root. and I'm using passwd ---- standard in for the simple reason that I didn't care checking if chpasswd is even available on Rocky. I don't know because I didn't take the 10 seconds of time that it takes to figure it out. Right, then we are at the end of play number 2. So at the end of play number 2, which is right here, we have a user with the name Ansible, and this user with the name Ansible is capable of logging in using a password. And then I continue, and I'm continuing the remote setup. I need to tell you, this is where I needed to make an important choice, and the important choice is between taking some coffee or further optimizing this. This is not an optimal play, but it's doing what it needs to be done, and there's a precondition that I didn't take care of, and that's not really nice. I will tell you. So what are we doing? We are using hosts all. And on hosts all, we have a couple of tasks. The first task is where it makes sure that a directory with the name .ssh in /home/Ansible exists with the permission mode 600. Then we have this name copy SSH key, where we are using the copy module to copy id rsa.pub to the destination authorized keys. And in case you are wondering, hey Sander, don't you know that there is this awesome Ansible module? What was the name again? Authorized keys. Yes, I'm aware of that, but that module in fact is not really doing what I want it to do. That's a module that you can use to copy over authorized public keys from specific users, but that only works if the user who is owner of the authorized key is using that module. And it's too complicated, so I would rather go for something simple. You know, the thing in authorized key, you want to use authorized key if you are dealing with machines that might already have a file with the name authorized keys, because then you don't want to overwrite, you want to append. But here we are talking about brand new machines, a brand new user account. And this brand new user account is certainly not having any authorized keys. And thank you. Yes, the permission mode should be 700. Absolutely, it should, because this is a directory and not a file. Thank you very much. Now that we are talking about the permission mode on line 71. Notice that if in Ansible you are using a permission mode, it is recommended to always specify your permission mode in 4 digits, not 3. Because if you do 3 digits and you don't specify the single quotes, then the first digit is for the special permissions and the other permissions are for your regular permissions. That's not going to work. Hey, I would be interested, by the way, if you see the logical problem in this last play, feel free to post in the group chat. But definitely there is a logical problem in this last play. I'm just wondering if you can see it. It's not a syntax problem, it's just a logical problem. While you do, I'm continuing with the very last part. The very last part is setting up privilege escalation using line in file. Line in file, this case is creating a file with the name etc sudoers .d/Ansible. So that's the file. It will create it if it doesn't exist. It probably doesn't exist, so that is okay. And then the line is Ansible all is all no passwd all. That is of course very, very bad security, but I can't cover everything in a 2-hour session, so we just deal with it. We want to be able to work with Ansible. Now if you are going to use Ansible to modify your sudo configuration in an automated way, then I would always recommend you use a validate command. And this validate command is making sure that the syntax is validated, and if there is no issues, then it will work. If there is issues, the changes won't be written, because if you make syntax errors into any file in the sudo configuration, then you are going to lock yourself out completely from working with sudo. Chima, I don't understand why you say line 80 is not visible. I have it in front of me and I'm sharing everything. Maybe somebody else in group can confirm whether or not line 80 is visible or not. But hey, if it is not, Chima, just download the file from the Git repository. Thank you, Bas, for confirming that it is visible. Everybody, did you see the problem? I think the problem is that in the first task, starting line 67, I am creating or I'm verifying the existence of the .ssh directory. Then we copy the SSH key, but we are missing the part where we generate the SSH key. I think that we have a problem here, and I don't know how to integrate it into the playbook in an elegant way. So I also don't want to spend too much time on this because we need to go and talk about Kubernetes. So I'm going for the lame solution. That's also something I did not take care of in display. Sudo user add Ansible. And I'm creating this user, and next, what do I need to do with my user? Ansible sudo vi sudo. And I'm sorry for not optimizing my playbook with this, but if you know what we are doing here, then that should be okay. And going for the insecure but convenient option of giving wheel passwordless access, and sudo user mod -ag wheel Ansible. That should be doing it. And now if I use su -Ansible, I am in the right directory, and I can use oh, I did not set a password for user Ansible. Okay, sudo passwd Ansible. Going once and going twice, and now it should be better. And then I can log in as Ansible, and I can do SSH keygen, so that we have this SSH public private key pair. Passwordless, that's exactly what I want it to be. Then I'm going back to my student shell, because this playbook is written to be working as user student. And let's give it a go. Ansible playbook on setup.yaml. Ansible playbook on setup.yaml. We might have to do some password related stuff. -K for the SSH password, -uppercase K for the sudo password. And I think that should be enough, and everything else is taken care of inside the playbook. So here I'm entering the SSH password. I'm pressing enter for the become passwords, and oh boy, what do we have? We have an offending line appears to be. I did not see that earlier. Shoot, but that's the risk of having a playbook that is tested in 5 minutes or so. But hey, I told you earlier, troubleshooting is an interesting part of the learning experience. I do promise that within 10 minutes we have a working configuration, because I appreciate troubleshooting, but I also appreciate time management, and I want to make sure that I do my thing within the 2 hours. So what am I getting? I am getting error appears to be line 80, column 39, but maybe elsewhere. And the offending line appears to be create yes line Ansible no pass WD colon. Aha. That's an easy one. Anyone, any suggestions on how we are going to fix that? It doesn't like the colon here. And do we understand why it doesn't like the colon? I think we do. So line 80, the thing in Ansible is that Ansible is using key value pairs, and the key value pairs are separated by using colon. Exactly. The colon is YAML syntax. So if I put that between quotes, then it should be considered a string, and it should work out all right. Just double checking, because I made a weird movement, and there we go. And we will try again. And as we can see, oh, it is doing all right, but what it's telling here, it is telling us that type error, file not found error, object is not subscriptable in Ansible.cfg. That is kind of surprising because I have done that successfully earlier, but we will find out. And we need to read what is going on. Hang on, there's one thing that I want to do. That's a dirty trick. And no, this was not the one. There might be dependency solutions where you are trying to create something, but that is not working right here. We really do have an error. So TMP Ansible, where is this line? Everybody feel free to tell me where the problem is. And no, I'm not going to do Ansible lint. Ansible lint is taking away your capability of thinking about it. And I just want to understand what is happening. So I'm getting a file not found error, object is not subscriptable. I have no idea what object is not subscriptable is, and I'm not going to waste your time either using any Google or whatever. So what I will do here, I will do a quick check on the blocking file py is not found. You should almost think that. It looks a little bit as if I made a dumb error. So block in file. And block in file is there, and I can see we have block in file. My prime suspect is this block in file. So we have the path ansible.cfg, and in the path ansible.cfg it has a create yes, so it will create it if it does not exist. Then we have the block, and in the block we have the syntax that we want. And that is an interesting one. I don't see it, to be honest. But as I promise you that I am not going to spend too much time in troubleshooting for the simple reason that we don't have that time. Hang on. Yeah, we have create yes. I wanted to double check the create yes. I am going for the lame solution here. Please forgive me, but we do need time for this Kubernetes stuff as well. So I would say eat this, Ansible. And no worries, things like this are frustrating, and they keep me up awake at night, and I will fix that. I'm just not going to do that now. I hope you appreciate that I want to use our time as efficiently as possible. So there we go, and we are moving on. And now we can see it creates the Ansible.cfg. And next it is telling us set up user account on the remote host, skipping no host matched. Now I am going to run it again, and okay. Beats me what is happening here with this Ansible.cfg. I am going to run it again, and with a little tweak, and block in file, you need to go back to further testing. And the reason that I want to run it again is because I'm creating some configuration here. And this configuration, is telling me no host matched. Now I need to check inventory. Yeah, no host match. You know what's going on? I'm not specifying which host to use in the inventory at all. So I need -i inventory, and there we go. And then we can see that it's working so much better. We did not see the getter facts. We also did not see any error message about the inventory, but the fact that you don't see gathering facts means that it has an inventory issue, can't find these hosts, and that is why it is not working out all right. Yeah, Pascal, I'm completely aware. It's an idempotency issue, and this is one of these examples where I know what to do, I just haven't done it. You should use a marker. If you use a marker in block in file, you fix the idempotency and you don't get the doubles and the problems about that. That would be something I would absolutely fix in a 4-day Ansible course, but here we need to set our priorities. Talking about which, you can see it changed Kubuntu. And then we see, oh no, we get a permission denied. Permission denied was an issue creating home SSH. Okay, that's also one that we are going to skip out because we walked around that already by manually creating the configuration file. Let's kick this one out. And let's run it again. Hey everybody, I am going to run it again, but now we are already quite far and we are getting a problem on the last part. So in order to make sure that I don't have to run the entire playbook again, I am going to add a tag finishing, and I am going to use Ansible playbook setup.yaml -- tags is finishing. I just want to run the last part again because that is the only part that we are needing at this moment. And there we can see that's gathering facts on Kubuntu. Of course, the dummy host is going to create some issues because we don't have the dummy host available. It was just a dummy. But the Kubuntu host hopefully is going to be all right, with which it will be set up correctly. And yes, Amit, that is one issue. The playbook has to be run 2 times always, because on the first run there is no inventory. And what do we get here? Cannot find home ansible.ssh id rsa.pub. That's an interesting one. It looks as if I've overlooked something. id rsa.pub su-ansible going into the Ansible user account ls-l on .ssh is showing id rsa.pub. You know what? Let me cheat my way out of here and do an SSH copy ID to Kubuntu because that is where I need to be. And SSH copy ID is giving me a no identity found. Sorry, su-ansible. Need to get back in my Ansible user account and SSH copy ID to Kubuntu. Hey Pascal, I noticed there is some activity in the chat. If you find a moment to address the items that people are addressing here, then I can focus on what we are doing here and make it working. I would much appreciate if you can do that for me, Pascal. And okay. Ansible add Kubuntu password. Damn, I need some more troubleshooting in my playbook. I'm not going to do that, folks. I'm just going to wrap it up here because I'm running out of prep time. You cannot see, but I am right now on the Kubuntu machine, and I am checking the Ansible user. Right, there's an issue in the change password option. So I am going to set that manually. There we go. Let me try the SSH copy ID again and see if it works now. And there we go, that seems to be better. So SSH to Kubuntu. And I'm on the Ubuntu host, and let's also do a sudo ls/root and password root login doesn't seem to be successful. I'm going to fix that on Ubuntu as well, And as I told you folks, I am going to make sure that we will be up and running in not too much time. And that is why I'm not showing what I'm doing right now. I'm just going to fix this Ansible configuration. So Ansible all is all no pass WD all, that should be it. And that works ls-l on /root, and okay, there's nothing in /root, but the fact that this is working is indicating that we are in business, and that means that we are ready to continue with the second part of this presentation. And the second part of the presentation is about the Kubernetes stuff. So let me tell you what is needed about Kubernetes stuff. Noor El-Deen, I disabled fact gathering only on the first play, not on the second play. On the second play, I specifically turn it on again. Right, everybody, we are going to move forward to the Ubuntu part of the setup. And in the Ubuntu part of the setup, I want to make sure before we are going there that you know what this is all about. So I am going to temporarily leave my demo screen and get to the desktop. I'm going to draw for you so that we get an overview. After the drawing, we make a short break, and after the break, we will continue and we are going to wrap it up. But I want to visualize what we are going to do in order to set up Kubernetes. So here we are. I have my control machine. I have my Kubuntu machine. On the Kubuntu machine, I am going to use Ansible to create an Ubuntu, a Kubernetes cluster on Ubuntu. Normally, the Kubernetes cluster has a control node and it has worker nodes. I am going to create that as an all-in-one solution. All-in-one means that I don't have two separate nodes. I just have one node, which helps you to get your own Kubernetes cluster up and running in a pretty easy and fast way. The second part that we are going to need is the Kubernetes client. That is the Cube Ctl command line interface. The Cube Ctl command line interface is what you are going to use to manage your cluster. I need that to be on the control node, which means that from the control node, I can run commands like kubectl get all and such, but I can also use Ansible playbooks. And if I want to run Ansible playbook on the control node to address Kubernetes the right way, I need this Cube Ctl client to be present. So we need to configure this Cube Ctl client in such a way that it can reach out to the Kubernetes cluster on the Kubuntu node. And we also need to make sure that this Kubernetes cluster is built. Roughly, in order to install the Kubernetes cluster, we need to install some software, and we also need to run the kube adm init command. And again, everybody, what I'm showing here is proof of concept. And I hope the proof of concept is inspiring enough to get you further in whatever you want to do with Kubernetes, because there's so much else that you can do. My mission here, and we are going to do that after the break, is to make sure that we have this basic setup up and running. And once we have the basic setup up and running, we are going to run a very simple pod in the Kubernetes cluster, just as a proof of concept to verify that it is all working. But first, something far more important, and that is going to be our break. Let me just clone the Git here again. That's lazy, I know, but git clone https no, not Sander van Vugt, github.com/Sander van Vugt /Ansible in 3 weeks is what we are going to need. And there we go. And the reason I need this is because of my countdown timer script. We are going to have a break, as I told you, 12-minute break, and we are going to do that right now. I keep my microphone and video open, so you won't see me while we are on break, but when we are back from the break, we are going to do everything else. Just making sure that you can see the demo system. Demo system is right here, and I see you in 12 minutes, everybody. Enjoy your break. Hey everybody, if you have any questions while we are waiting for the rest of this break, feel free, I'm here. To Mediso, you are asking, you would like to replicate, you need 2 virtual machines, that is right, control host and a Kubuntu host. Ubuntu, that's basically Ubuntu. 4 gigs of RAM is what you need. And anyone else, the rest of the time before we are starting, I'm available to answer questions.
So Sander.
Yeah.
Peter here. Which of the deep dives are you going to deliver for us? I sent you in a PDF with a schedule of our deep dives in 2022. And which one are you going to deliver?
Let me check on that PDF. The deep dive.
Yeah.
Well, I am going to do the Kubernetes one.
That's May 10th. Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe I will do some others as well. I don't know. You know, Peter, we are a team of experts with IT Guild, and I'm pretty sure that no matter if it would be me or Frederick or Michael or Pascal, that people are going to be happy anyway.
Yeah. So I remember you saying you wanted to do one with Mark Oli.
I still need to ask Mark about it. That would be the OpenStack one.
Hey, I see his beautiful face online. So.
Good morning.
Hey, Mark.
Good morning.
I'm very glad to be here because I reinstalled my laptop completely yesterday evening. Took me
okay, nice.
Yeah.
So Mark, do you want to do a deep dive course together with me, June 15th?
Yeah, sure, no problem.
Okay, managing OpenStack with Ansible, that's the deal.
Yes, well, as you know, I have a perfectly fine OpenStack. So.
Yeah, I know, and that's why I would love to do this with you.
Yeah, let's try not to break it because I am running classes on.
Yeah. We are going to discuss the setup so that everybody who is joining that course can follow along on their own setup, and that will be okay.
Sure. I will make sure I have nested virtualization enabled on my OpenStack so we can actually create a test cluster of VMs within the live OpenStack.
That would be nice. So then we have OOO, OpenStack on OpenStack.
Wow.
Mark, if we are going to use OOO to install OpenStack in your OOO, what would that be?
I have no idea.
How would you call it?
Well, if it was OOO within OOO and 2 more, I would call it Xi Jinping.
Yeah, probably. All right, everybody, we are continuing in about 3 minutes. If you have any questions before we continue, please ask. And if not, we are continuing in 3 minutes and 20 seconds exactly. You might want to take the benefit of me having time to take questions, even if Pascal has been doing an awesome job. Pascal, thank you so much for taking care of these questions while I was teaching. And Peter, are you still here?
Yes.
Managing Puppet with Ansible? Whose idea is that?
Yours.
No, that should be migrating from Puppet to Ansible.
Okay. I'm not getting bothered by in-depth knowledge, so
I know.
I just follow your lead. But I think it's a nice program.
Managing Puppet with Ansible. Well, you know, technically seen, you can manage Puppet with Ansible.
How?
That would be a cool geek kind of class.
So do we have any volunteers in this chat room? Everybody's very quiet.
Yeah.
Because how many people do we have? About 50, 60?
Okay, can you hear me?
Let me see. Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, yeah, quite simple. Managing Puppet with Ansible is quite simple. Package, name, Puppet, state, absent. That's it.
Yeah.
Wow. I guess I learned something today.
No worries. But for example, the KVM part, for example, I would like to take up with you, Sander, if you'd like to. And for example, if it can help you with Kubernetes or just with the container engines prior to that. So we can, for example, prep machines and then have, for example, Kubernetes either run with Rancher, either run with Containerd, either run with, for example, CryoD. Just let me know.
Hey, folks, can you still see my shared screen?
No, not yet. Let me see. No.
I do see a fat penguin.
Yeah, that's a good one, huh?
Yeah, that would be me. Did I really just
Are you calling me a fat penguin?
Crashing? Okay, everybody, I need to start my VMware Fusion again.
No worries.
I'm always so happy with VMware Fusion, but believe it or not, it has just crashed on me.
If you know something about provisioning, of improvising, and know when you see the Cisco switches.
All right, have a look. Like a ducky?
Okay, I am getting back to ITG control. Where is my ITG control? I'm getting back in control. Everybody, if you see black screen at this moment, that is right. It was not intentional, but I'm working on it. I'm always telling people that VMware Fusion is so awesome, and it just crashed on me. At this point, folks, can you see my shared screen again, showing you a clock?
Yeah. I thought my PC was broken, but it's your clock. So that works.
All right. Then it's time to continue. Peter, you want to say something about the document that you just posted?
Yeah, so it speaks for itself, but it's a short, it's a document with a short description of IT Guild and what we do, and interesting URLs or links, how you say that, you can click on and view something about IT Guild. Yeah, next year it's Automate Everything year. We have a very good priced program for you. Managing Kubernetes, for example. Sander told me that it's not possible, but Pascal said it is possible, very simple. But yeah, it starts at May and ends in December next year. And please check out our website, check out the URLs in the document, and yeah, send me an email if you're interested of becoming a subscriber, or if you're a freelancer please get in touch with me of becoming a member of the IT Guild Cooperative. It's not just for Dutch guys or girls. There are not a lot of girls here, but
we can use
please contact me, and then yeah, we can see if IT Guild is a good community for you to improve yourself as a professional freelancer or just as a professional. That's it, Sander.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Okay, thank you.
With that, everybody, commercial messages are over. Peter, Peter and I and Pascal and many other folks in here are IT Guild members, and as IT Guild, we have fun. And that is basically the reason why we are presenting today. A little bit of background. Pascal and me, we exchange information a lot, and we are working closely together. And I was like, hey, Pascal, I'm working on this Kubernetes with Ansible. And Pascal was, yeah, and I'm doing Cisco switches on Ansible. And first we had like, that's so cool, let's work together for a day. But both of us, we are instructors. So, you know, working together ended up in presenting together for a worldwide audience. That's what we do at IT Guild. Mainly have fun, share our knowledge, and that is what it's all about. And there's a lot of expertise there. That was, well, make comments commercial message, but really it's how it is. Also how it is, the Cube cluster setup. Excuse me. I'm going to explain my next playbook, and I'm going to get some water. Water. There's the water. This is a playbook that I've been talking about before we went on a break. And this is a playbook that is setting up the Kubernetes cluster. So what are we doing? I'm going to walk you through the different parts of this playbook again. And by doing so, hopefully you will get some insight into the playbook, and then we are going to check it out and see if it is working. You know, the nice things about playbooks is that, of course, they are working. The playbook we did this morning was kind of an exception because that was last minute work, and I was excited about it. I just wanted to throw it at you to show you how you can automate setting up the hosts. This playbook has been working a couple of times already. If you have created a playbook, there's one thing though, and that is the starting situation. Every single time when you work on the playbook, especially if you are optimizing your playbook, you change your configuration. At some point in time, it will get started. I have successfully run this time for this playbook 4 times now, and I'm just wondering, did I ever run it in the same starting conditions? We will see. The essence of playbooks in Ansible is you test them in a wide range of possible situations to see if they are working out all right. And let's just hope it does. And if it does not, then at least I am sure that by going through the playbook and by going through the different components of the playbook, if you know what we are talking about, it will only be a small step in getting something that is working. My playbooks, especially the playbooks that you find in this Ansible in 3 weeks Git repo, are work in progress. I'm currently working on creating a new complete video course about Ansible. That's a monster course, and I'm still in the middle of developing it. In case something does not work out as expected, like the one we did this morning, have a look at it again within a week or so. It will most likely be fixed, and you will find a README with information on what has happened. With that, let's get into the details. So first, a little oversight. Wow, is that really 179 lines of playbook code? I'm afraid it is. Let me put on line numbering again. And let me talk you through it. So this is running on hosts, Cube host. In this playbook, I'm using a variable. and the variables -e kube host is hostname to define the name of the host that you want to install. If you want to know what is the relation between this playbook and the one that we created this morning, well, this is not a workflow. This is just an independent playbook. It's completely developed in an independent way. Then line number 7, that is where the fun really starts. Line number 7 is where I am checking if we need to install container D. Remember, the purpose of this playbook is to set up a Kubernetes cluster. And a Kubernetes cluster needs a container engine to be running. And a container engine that I have chosen to use here is a container D engine. If container D is available, then normally it's available as a systemd service. And that is why I'm using shell. System Ctl is active container D, and I am using ignore errors true. And the ignore errors true, well, it's just going to tell me if if the service is running yes or no. The important thing is that I'm using register. Register is active, and by using this register is active, I can create a conditional in the next task. Amit, thank you very much for your input. Everybody, I want to repeat what I told before. I'm not so very interested in suggestions on how to do it in a different way. I'm just presenting a way of doing it. We only have 2 hours of time. So thanks again for your input. I'm very aware that it can be done in different ways as well. But let's focus on the big picture and not too much on the detail. Right, register is active. What is this register is active? That is creating a variable, and this variable is the result of the shell command. And this variable is what we are going to use in line 13, when is active.rc non-equals 0. So what is that? Well, it is looking at the return code of this command. The command is either successful or not. If the command is successful, it generates a return code of 0. If the command is not successful, then it generates a return code that is not 0. Now, what is the thing? We want to run a role. The role is gelinguy.containerd, and we only want to run it if systemctl is active containerd has returned an error. So if it's not currently active, then we assume that it is not installed, and we are going to install it based on this conditional. When statements actually are a very nice way to figure out to do things in specific conditions, and I like using when in combination with the register a lot to ensure that the specific task is only going to be executed if a specific conditional is true. Then we need to disable swap. I'm using command swap of -a. That is for the simple reason that you cannot install Kubernetes on a system where swap is currently enabled. So we need to turn it off. And apart from turning it off, let me put it on the top what we are talking about. We need to remove it from etc fstab. So line in val is editing etc fstab to make sure that if it finds the regular expression swap, it makes sure that it is absent. Then we need to make sure that we have supporting kernel modules. This is actually a fun one. For some weird reason, I don't like working with Ubuntu server too much. I'm always working with Ubuntu desktop. That's probably because I'm using my machines in courses, and in courses it's so much more visible, so much easier to see if you're in a graphical desktop. Now it happens to be that in order to run a Kubernetes cluster successfully, a couple of kernel modules needs to be enabled. And these kernel modules are present by default on a server. They are not present by default on the desktop. And that is why right here I'm creating this file containerd.conf, and in this file I am adding overlay and brnet filter using the block module. Next, load kernel modules. So I'm using modprobe, and modprobe is another Ansible module that allows you to dynamically load kernel modules. And what are we loading? Well, name items state present, where the items are right here in the loop. This is these little kind of things that you need to consider if you want to create a playbook that can be applied in a very broad range. If I just would skip it, then it would run on Ubuntu server. It wouldn't run on Ubuntu desktop, and now it will run on both. Notice that this playbook up to now is just for use on Ubuntu. In case you are wondering, why do you do it on Ubuntu and not on Red Hat family? Well, that is because the Red Hat family, with the shift away from Docker to their own virtualization platform, is taking a completely different approach in installing Kubernetes. Also, and notice this is my opinion, it's not a fact, but my opinion is that Red Hat is trying to push OpenShift, and by trying to push OpenShift, they are not making that many efforts anymore to make sure that Kubernetes is easy to install on Red Hat. Sorry, pushing away a sneeze. Let's continue with blocking file. So in blocking file, I create a snap-in file that is going to set a couple of kernel tunables, and these kernel tunables are going to be required as the lower foundation of the Kubernetes stack. Then we reread the proc parameters. Right here we have created proc parameters. Proc parameters are all about system optimization, and we need to make sure that they are present, and then we can continue in line 45 with the preparation to add the software. Step 1, to add the software, we need apt-key. If you have a high-level overview, we have apt-key, we have apt repository, we have packets, and all of them are related. The thing is that the Kubernetes software is not in the default Ubuntu repositories, so we need apt repository to add the repository, and once we have added the repository, we can use the package module to actually install the Kubernetes packages. And on Ubuntu, in order to add repositories, you need to make sure that a GPG key for that repository is present. And that is why we need this, this type of input. Then we have the package module, and the package module is going to install all the packages that we need, which are kubeadm, Cube Ctl, and kubelet. Where kubeadm is a command line utility that is going to be needed to create the Kubernetes cluster. Cube Ctl is for managing Kubernetes resources, so for running workloads in the Kubernetes environment, and kubelet is a kind of the foundation that needs to be present on every node in the Kubernetes cluster. The kubelet is what is allowing you to run Kubernetes pods on top of no matter which container runtime. So we need all of these to be present, and then we need to make sure that the kubelet service is up and running. So I'm using the service module to do so, and after doing all of this, I am rebooting all of the nodes. Why am I doing that? Well, because there's so much that has changed at a low level, I need to make sure that it comes back the right way. So what we see here is a handler being triggered. You might be aware that a handler is a conditional task. The thing in handlers is that you are going to run the handler, and the handler is only going to do something if something has changed. So what do we see right here? Well, we are going to enable the kubelet, and only if the kubelet has been enabled, we are going to run the handler, and the handler is rebooting all of the nodes. If the kubelet already was enabled and nothing has changed, the handler won't run, and so we can take out the annoying reboot of the nodes. Now here we have the reboot module, and this reboot module comes with a couple of parameters to make sure that we wait for some time for the nodes to get back, and once they are, we can continue. Now part 2 is where we need to set up localhost as a Kubernetes client. And in order to do so, I am using localhost. and localhost, I am using gather facts false. I don't need no fact gathering. Fact gathering is useful for conditionals. I don't need no conditionals here. I just need to install some software. In order to set up the Kubernetes client in Ansible, that's an important one. Ansible, whenever Ansible is going to talk to an external environment, you need to install additional Python modules. And that's what we do right here using the Python pip Ansible module. So pip is going to look for Kubernetes as well as OpenShift. It's going to make sure that this Kubernetes as well as OpenShift Python module is available. The thing is, if you want to set up the control node as a Cube Ctl node, just installing Cube Ctl is enough. But if you want to address Cube Ctl using Ansible, you need these Python modules. And that is why we have these steps in lines 81 up to 86. And then I'm fetching Cube Ctl just from the internet using shell directly from a URL. And yes, I might have used URI to do it in a more decent way. But hey, that is something that we need to talk about a little bit anyway. You can see right here in line 88, I'm using shell. Shell is not an elegant way of doing things in Ansible. But if you are writing a 200 lines playbook in an Ansible environment, it won't all be beautiful straight from the beginning. You need some development time. And the first mission that you've got is that you want to have a working playbook. And there is one benefit of using shell and command and stuff like that. Even if it's not always the nicest way of doing it, it's an easier way of getting your things done. In my way of running of developing playbooks, sometimes I throw in shell and just to make the likeliness for the playbook to be successful bigger. And once the playbook is running, I can always think about doing it in an easier way. Right, then we have command 8999 in which we are installing Cube Ctl, which is using the command install -o root -g root, which is setting the right ownership, group ownership of Cube Ctl. That's the binary that we have just fetched and which is installed in the local directory, and we put that to user local bin Cube Ctl. So at this time we have a Cube Ctl binary, and that is all. And that makes us ready for the next part of the procedure. Mark, again, thank you very much for your input. Everybody, if you see something that is wrong, please tell me. If you see something that can be done better, please tell me by email, not in chat, because if I see things in chat, then I'm going to read it, it's going to distract me, and we need my attention on this presentation to make sure that I'm going to make it in the remaining half an hour or so. Right. Next part is where we are going to install the cluster. Ignore errors true, gather facts false. I don't need no facts here, and I'm going to run it on the host Cube host, and this Cube host is the Kubuntu, the host that we have defined in our previous run. Then I'm going to use tasks, and in the tasks again I'm using shell to see if Cube API is already running. And if we look for Cube API already running, well, we write the result to a variable in register. Here we have in line 102, 103 a debug that is showing us the variable register. And then we are going to run this variable register again in line 105. The thing is, we need to run a command to initialize a Kubernetes cluster. But we only want to run this command if we don't have a Kubernetes cluster yet. Now the thing with the command module, which is needed here, is that the command module by nature is not idempotent. And that means that where normally you want Ansible to say okay and move on to the next task, if a specific condition is already true. In this case, the command module is not idempotent by nature, and if we would run the command module without the when statement in line 105, it would fail with an error on kubeadm in it because the cluster is already available, and then nothing is going to happen anymore, and it's not going to proceed to the rest of the playbook. So that's what we don't want to happen, and that is why I'm using when is running .rc not equals to 0. So if we do not have Kube API up and running right now, and then we are assuming that we don't have a running cluster, and we are going to build the new cluster. Of course, here, if you want to make the playbook better, you might consider also building in some logics that is going to test if maybe you have installed the cluster, but maybe you haven't started. That's also a possibility. Here, it's the simple check. We are looking if the cluster is running. If the cluster is not running, we are going to install it. Be aware of this. This might be something that you want to change to match any condition that you might encounter. Then we come to a part that was a little bit annoying. Let me explain why it is annoying. If you want to set up Cube Ctl client, the Cube Ctl client normally is created by copying over the configuration file etc kubernetes admin.conf from the Kubernetes cluster node, and this file needs to be available in .cube/config on the local node. You can see that I'm switching a little bit between localhost and the Kubernetes host, and then localhost again, to make sure that this work is going to be happening all right. The first step needs to be happening on localhost. That's the Ansible control node. That is where we need a directory with the name home ansible.cube. Owner is Ansible, group is Ansible. Then we have a debug. Let me see. Yeah, I'm saying here we need to fetch the client config to the Ansible control host. Using all these places to switch between hosts is not pretty. Should look for a better option. Delegate to might be a better option here, but I did not have time to work that out. That will be in the next version of the playbook. So for now, this is the way I'm doing it. And yes, I'm aware that it can be done in a better way. So I'm using file. File is creating the .cube directory. Then we can go to kubehost. So the host is kubehost, and I'm using fetch. Fetch is what you can use to fetch a file from a remote host. I want to fetch the file etc kubernetes admin.conf, and I want to write it to the destination /home/ansible/.cube/config. Now, if you are going to use the fetch module, you should be aware that the default behavior of the fetch module is to create a subdirectory in the current directory with the name of the remote host. And that is because in Ansible, you might want to use fetch to fetch a file from 100 managed nodes. And then you cannot write them to one file. You need some diversity to write them to the right location. In this case, I just want to fetch the file from one node. And in order to fetch it in the right way, I want to write it to this specific file, and I'm using flat true. And the flat true is making sure that in the destination path, it is not going to create a path that includes the name of the host where the file is coming from. So here we are almost at the point that we have a working kube config. Then we are going to change the permission mode, and this permission mode of course is required to make sure that the kube config has the appropriate owners. So I'm running again on localhost. I'm using file, and I'm using file with owner Ansible and group Ansible to make sure that user as well as group ownership is set all right. And with that, by the time we get to line 146, we have a working Kubernetes client. Now that we have a working Kubernetes client, we can use Ansible to manage the Kubernetes cluster. And that means that we are going to complete the cluster setup. We do that on localhost. And the things that we do is basically we are going to run all the commands that normally are needed to set up the Kubernetes cluster. You know, if you want to put a specific configuration task in Ansible, it can be pretty simple. Just take the installation guideline, follow the steps in the installation guideline, and put all of them in the command module. That's a nice way to get started. Like right here, I'm using commands to run Cube Ctl get ns Tigera operator. Why is that? That is because I'm going to install the Calico network agent, and this network agent depends on the Tigera operator. So I want to know if the Tigera operator is already installed. So I'm running command to get that information, store the return of the command in the Tigera variable, and next in line 158, when Tigera.rc non equals 0, which means when Tigera operator is not yet installed, I am going to use kubectl create -f blah blah to install the package that installs the Tigera operator. What I'm doing here is one way of using command in an idempotent way. By default, the command module is not idempotent, and that makes that if you don't take care of the idempotency, then it would fail in case that the Tigera operator is already created. Fail means failing command. Failing commands is triggering a return code of non-zero, and that makes the remainder of the playbook abort. And you want to avoid failure. You want Ansible to skip over tasks that you don't really need to do, and that's exactly what we are doing right here. Next, as a part of setting up this Tigera operator Calico network plugin, we need to modify a YAML file. So in order to modify the YAML file, I'm using get URL to get it from the remote location. The name of the YAML file is customresources.yaml, and I'm writing it to the current directory so that in the current directory I can use a replace to make sure that it matches the networking that I want to have. A replace is a nice module that allows you to look for a regular expression. So the regular expression is 192.168, and that will be replaced with 10.10. And then before we are going to do anything, again, a check, kubectl get ns Calico system and register Calico. Because if Calico is already up and running, then we don't need to run 172 again. And that is why 172 and 173 are working together to make sure that I'm only going to run this kubectl create custom resources if Calico is not currently running. Last step is where I need to modify the Kubernetes control node. And this Kubernetes control node by default has a taint, the taint master, and this taint master makes that user pods cannot run on the control node. The mission here is to create an all-in-one cluster, and in my all-in-one cluster I need to remove that taint, and that is why you see this command kubectl taint nodes all node role Kubernetes IO master minus. That will remove the taint, and then finally we will get a completed message. Hey, what is happening here? Name completed, debug. The Kubernetes AOI cluster setup is not completed. That's what we call a typo. That is now completed. Notice that there is one little thing here. And the thing is the idempotency of command number 175. The good news is that this is the last module that we are running, but if the taint would already be removed from the master node, which theoretically is possible, then we would get an error. But fortunately we have ignored errors through, so we are getting to command to the final module anyway. And that would set up the Kubernetes cluster for us. Let's run not kubectl but Ansible playbook on kube cluster setup.yaml. And oh boy, what do we get? Well, we are getting the value host has an invalid value, which includes an undefined variable. Error was kube host is undefined. I have two problems here. Problem number one is that I need the startup parameter. Problem number two is that I need an inventory. So I'm creating an inventory inventory, and in my inventory I am going to include Kubuntu. Do we also need an Ansible.cfg? Well, I think that we can already SSH into Kubuntu. I'm just taking care of the pre-requirement steps, and I'm going to run it again with a bunch of parameters so that we can provide at least -k. Do we need -k? Well, let's just see how far it's getting. Not any far, because I'm forgetting -e cube host equals Kubuntu. And that's an interesting one. Do you see that? Skipping, no host matched. Well, let's figure out in a little bit why it is giving us skipping on setting up Cube host, Cube cluster on Ubuntu. Let's move up and let's figure out what we see here. Should have given it a couple of white lines. First thing to investigate is that right here we have a setup cube cluster on Ubuntu, and it's telling us skipping no host match. That is kind of critical. Then the play is telling us set up localhost as a Kubernetes client. That's the second part, where we are going to set up the localhost already. With this Kubernetes client, that is going all right, but then in this play, install the cluster, we get another skipping no host matched. What does skipping no host match mean? That means that we are using a when statement, and a when statement that doesn't find any matching hosts. So we need to figure out what is happening in this very first part of our playbook to generate the skipping. So we are all the way on the top, host, cube host. And we are looking for host cube host. Run this playbook, that is okay. And then we see that all of it is skipping. That looks as if we are running against the wrong host, right? That's one of these nice things. I warned you against it before we started running it. Every time I'm running this playbook, the conditions are slightly different. And in slightly different conditions, you will notice that you need to do different things. So skipping no host matched. Cat on etc host. What are our hosts? I have Kubuntu example.com dummy. Sudo vim on etc host. I don't like it too much that I have Kubuntu example.dummy twice. That is something to be fixed. Ansible -m ping. Is that so? Ansible -i inventory -m ping. -i inventory. Skipping no host match. You know what is happening here. Of course, I'm not doing it the right way. But what is happening here is that I have no default for an inventory. So Ansible without an inventory is going to run this against localhost, and then it can't do anything with this first play. So apart from -e cube host is Kubuntu, I also need -i inventory to tell Ansible which inventory to use. And then at least it is starting to do something. And check if we need to install containerd. What do we see here? This is expected behavior. Here we see include role geerling guy containerd. I don't have the role geerling guy containerd. So Ansible Galaxy install geerling guy dot containerd is going to install that for us. And then I'm going to run it again, and we should at least get beyond that specific step. And oh no, look at that. We have an ensured dependencies are installed. That is an interesting one. So what is happening here? I'm getting a permission denied. Does that make sense about the getting permission denied? Of course that makes sense, because I did not tell Ansible in any way that I need privilege escalation. So it's going to the remote host as user Ansible. That's not going to work. So let's throw in a -b and a -k as well for become and the privilege escalation password. Did I already set up the privilege escalation password? I think I already did. So that shouldn't be necessary anymore. But -b for become, that is a requirement. And here you can see that now it's working better on the gearing guide containerd, and it is giving a change, and we are still in the gearing guide containerd. That is the role that is going through. The role, as you know, that's like a black box. It's a default solution that you can include in your playbook to make sure that you easily set up a configuration that is pretty common. You can see that it's moving forward. Everything is going quite all right so far. It's adding the Kubernetes repository. Now we get to an important part where you can see that it's installing the Kubernetes packages. These are the packages that we are going to need to run on the Ubuntu host to actually install the Ubuntu cluster. So now we are at the local machine, and oh, we are a little bit further already. What do we see? Install the cluster. So we are right now at the part where it is checking to see if we already have the cluster. Again, that is giving the error message, but the error message is showing us that is what we need. That is the isRunning.rc. You remember, we installed the cluster when isRunning.rc is non-equal to 1. As you can see here, we have the result that it is non-equal to 1, and now we have this Kubernetes cluster installation that is running. For your information, this is kubeadm init, and kubeadm init may take a little bit, and well, it is telling us a lot, and it's telling us also the Kubernetes AOI cluster setup is now completed. Run Cube Ctl get all to verify. So Cube Ctl get all. That's always an exciting moment. Cube Ctl get all. Are you going to do it, yes or no? Yeah, I have Cube Ctl get all. So with this, we have an up and running Kubernetes cluster. What were the requirements again? What was going wrong? Let's get back in history, because I can imagine with all this information, you might get lost a little bit. First reason why it didn't work, we were using just this command, and in this command, command number 20, there were actually 3 parts that were missing. Part number 1 was the inventory. We weren't using an inventory. We don't have a very rich Ansible.cfg file. Well, we don't have an Ansible.cfg file at all. And if you don't have an Ansible.cfg file, then that's okay, but you need to specify parameters on the command line, like the parameters that we can see right here. -e kube host is kubuntu, -i inventory, -b. Second thing, we did not install the gearing guide containerd role. That is something that I might have to include in this playbook to make it completely self-sufficient. But we have now applied it as a manual fix, and that makes that it works. So with that, we can have a look at the next part, which is create pod. As you probably know, in Kubernetes, it's all about managing pods. So how are we going to create the pods right here? Well, by running this code. So host localhost. Why is that host localhost? Well, that is host localhost because we need to run this on the Ansible node that contains the client. You know, if you are just managing Linux with Ansible, you are going to run all of your commands on the managed hosts. If you are going to manage cloud, but also Cisco routers, there's a large part that you are going to run just on the local host, and that's happening here as well. Become false. We don't need to become anybody in order to run this playbook. Then we have the task, and in the task, create a pod. In create a pod, I'm not very consistent in the terminology. This is kubernetes.core.kubernetes. This is an Ansible collection compatible name. And Ansible collections, I'm on Ansible 2.9. something, and I don't have collections yet. So let me do an Ansible doc pipe grab Kubernetes. Oh, sorry, I need Ansible doc -L. I'm looking up the correct name of the module so that we can apply quick fix. There you can see the Kubernetes module is what we need. So I am just going to bypass this topic of collections completely. That will be too much information for now. And I'm going to run the Kubernetes with the Kubernetes module, state present. Definition, and what do we find in the definition? Well, you find that what you are putting to this Kubernetes module is mainly the contents of a Kubernetes YAML file. If you have ever written YAML files from scratch, you will certainly recognize API version v1, kind pod, metadata, and in the metadata we have a name, we have a namespace, we have a label, we have a spec, and in the spec we are running a utility pod named BusyBox. I don't like running BusyBox too much. Let's make that Nginx. Because BusyBox is one of these containers that comes up and immediately goes away again. So you will get crash loopback off if you do. And then utility pod 1, let's just call that our first pod, whatever. Labels Ansible, App Galaxy. I don't want to do that. This should be doing it. And let's just run it. Ansible playbook create pod.yaml. Now the thing with this this playbook, this Kubernetes module, is that the Kubernetes module by itself is a really very simple module. This module allows you to throw any YAML code directly at your Kubernetes cluster. You know, in Kubernetes there is the declarative way, there's the imperative way. In the imperative way you are going to run all of your fancy commands. In the declarative way you are going to just throw some YAML code at your Kubernetes cluster. And that's exactly what it has done right now. So Cube Ctl get all is showing me, yay, our first pod is currently in a status of container creating, which means that our mission is accomplished. Just checking, I'm not sure what I was trying to do in manage cube. Yeah, in this manage cube we have a little bit more configuration. It's just another example. And in this other example, well, what you see, it is all about running the Kubernetes module. And in this Kubernetes module, you will throw in some YAML code. And that is what it is doing. Do we really need to do that now? I think we are good. And I think it's 4 minutes before our projected ending time, which means that I have time to take a couple of questions before we are going to close down this first part of our Ansible sessions. Everybody, a reminder, if you came in late, this was the first part. I hope you liked it very much. After this we will have a 1 hour break, and after the 1 hour break Pascal will demonstrate managing Cisco with Ansible. And for sure I will be there, Pascal. I'm so looking forward to hearing about all your experiences. I can tell you folks, Pascal is not only brilliant in Ansible, Pascal is also a brilliant Python programmer, and I know that he's been working with the Cisco related modules, and you want to be there. I don't see any questions coming in. If you do have a question, let me know that you are typing your question pretty fast. And haha, Pascal is going full improvising as well. Pascal, I love it, and I'm looking forward to your session. Everybody, I don't see questions coming in, so I guess that means that you don't have any questions, and that means that I am going to call it a day. Pascal, I'm going to do something very complicated, well, complicated from a new perspective as my perspective. I am going to make you presenter, Pascal, so that for the remainder you have presenter privileges, and Pascal, feel free to call me during the break.
No worries.
And everybody, I think with that, I'm out of here. So thank you very much, and hope to see you soon.